Hi, this short message is for my students in Africana diaspora, religion and culture, and for several other students who may be thinking about religion and Black Lives Matter right now. Maybe you come from a faith tradition that you're wondering what the relevance of all of this is for that tradition, or you're trying to articulate your own plan of action. Here's 3 fast facts about Black religion and Black Lives Matter right now. 1. You should know your history. Black religion has been a part of every broad social movement in the U.S. That includes the current Black Lives Matter movement. From its inception, Black Lives Matter has been described as distinctly different from the civil rights movement of the past, most notably in its dissimilarity to Black church-led efforts of the 50s and 60s. Such notions are coupled with skewed data on Black millennials, mostly who leads the Black Lives Matter efforts. Their continued movement away from the Black church has been noted. It's not entirely accurate, however, to say that Black millennials are leaving the Black church in droves, or that the Black church was the only religious well from which Black movements have historically drawn. Any cogent analysis of Black religion and Black Lives Matter today requires decentering the Black church in movement history. The broader religious genesis of Black Lives Matter includes both Christian and other diverse religious manifestations, not always institutionally sanctioned by the Christian Black church. Knowing this history means complicating how we read Black religion. For instance, we must think of W.E.B. Du Bois' Souls of Black Folk as both a celebration of the Black church and as a low-key critique of the sanctified church. Frederick Douglass delineating between white slave masters' religion and true religion, as he calls it, or true Christianity. Also think about Zora Neale Hurston talking about the voodoo of a character called Miss Catherine as both an anthropological work and a celebration of the sanctified church and its complexity. Seeing Harriet Tubman, abolitionist work, as also rich prophetic ground. Fannie Lou Hamer's fight for freedom to vote must also be considered an extension of Christ's liberatory work in Hamer's mind. This history, as Michael Gomez tells us, and exchanging our country marks, springs from many religious rivers. The Islam of Abdul Rahman, who disguised his recitation of the surahs as the Lord's Prayer, unbeknownst to white masters, is one example from the 1800s, or the infusion of Oludumare and other Yoruba gods in Caribbean and Afro-Latin belief systems and movements tells us of the diversity historically of Black religious expression. These diverse traditions live and are made alive in Black Lives Matter protests today, and the inclusion of West African Ifa practices of pouring libation and calling the names of those who joined the ancestors, like Breonna Taylor and Daniel Prude, just this year at the hands of police brutality. Knowing history tells us that this model of diverse religious thought that comes from operating with ingenuity and creativity at the margins represents a powerful strategy in fighting injustice. And that leads to the second fact: no strategy. The diverse strategies employed by Black Lives Matter activists today underscore a history of diverse religious strategies for racial justice. The movement today has been criticized for its lack of structure and clear leadership. Such criticisms are reliant upon patriarchal models of leadership, however. They are neither in keeping with the long tradition of African religious practices, and they say more about the pervasiveness of Western imperial thought and oppressive forces of capitalism on how we construct notions of power and privilege, and particularly on how we have constructed the Black Christian tradition. We're actually seeing more religion, not less, more leadership, fragmented as it is, and several forms. We can include efforts like the digital religious discourse around hashtag souls to the polls, and even popular cultural references to ancestor veneration or celebration of African traditional religion, as in Beyonce's Black is King, as representative of important sites for strategy building. And so in thinking about your own strategy, in light of this past and present, consider that religious leaders of the past have drawn on the immediate environment and resources around them in arranging strategies for racial justice. In short, remember, liberation always begins at home. Hammer began registering voters in Montgomery County, Mississippi. Tubman's initial abolitionist work centered on liberating her own family. Consider then your own sphere of influence and entry points for your community. We think of identifying with movements through larger hashtags, but if the past is any indicator, wider movements were shored up by local efforts, homegrown efforts for liberation, getting people free. Where you are through your online discourse with your sphere of influence is perhaps one of the most impactful roles you will play in bringing about justice. These Black religious voices began at home and moved with their vision out into the wider world. And that brings us to our final fact. And this is perhaps the hardest one: knowing the future. Religious folk past and present have deployed religion as a powerful tool and envisioning new possibilities. Whether flying away to Africa or establishing an imagined community like Earthseed and Octavia Butler's sci-fi work, Parable of the Sower, religious ground has helped us see and develop beautiful visions for the future. Butler's novel hitting New York Times bestseller lists last week, almost 30 years after its publication, reminds us of the timeliness of conversations on Black religion and their imagining of the future. Finally, once more, Black religion and Black Lives Matter means imagining new possibilities for the future, engaging essential strategies from right where you are, and also drawing on the rich legacy of Black religious activism of the past. Those are 3 things you should know about Black religion and Black Lives Matter right now. Thank you.